The results are in from the first Expedition Open of the 2021 season. Hello, everyone, and welcome to FECast, the official podcast of the Friends of Eternal. My name is Sunyveil. I have along with me Stormblessed, and today we are going to be going over the results of the Expedition Open and doing a deep dive into the analysis of said results. How are you doing, Stormblessed?
I'm doing well. I'm a little tired. We are recording this just a couple hours after the tournament just ended, so everything just happened, and we're about to give you all the rundown about what occurred, what happened maybe behind the scenes, and what changed between last time we were here talking about Expedition and now.
Yeah, a lot actually happened, and a lot of stuff that we didn't necessarily predict. Let's get this out of the way. The winner of the tournament was Watchwolf 92 with Machinations combo, Overloader combo, whatever you want to call up, against M. Gallop with another Realign the Stars combo with Align the Tesseract. That is also the deck that Stormbest played to a top 16 finish. I played Mono Fire and did not crack day 2. And yeah, that was a fun and exciting tournament from some points of view. I don't know. Having played a lot of the Machinations combo deck, I enjoyed watching the finals there when Watchwolf played it.
Yeah, I thought it was fairly interesting in a number of ways. It was a really interesting moment at the end of game one. A lot of discussion to be had about whether or not M. Gallop took the best line. I think that M. Gallop ended up not taking the best line and kind of punted the game away in some respects. But there's definitely a discussion to be had and argument made that the line they ended up taking was in fact the better line. I mean, I don't think so, but the fact that there's that discussion to be had about one moment in the game where there were a ton of other interesting moments and great decisions made by both sides, by both players about how best to maneuver the matchup was super interesting just on just the finals alone. Aside from the finals, as Sunday said, I got a top 16 this time, and I believe Tyler got a top 8, which makes both of us have 2 top 16s or better, which places us into the last chance invitational if none of us can achieve Worlds any other way. And it's interesting that Watchwolf also had a top 16 or better in the previous tournament, the last Open. So if they had ended up winning, if they had ended up losing to Gallop in the finals or someone else in the couple earlier rounds, they would have also been in the 2 top 16 situation, but they did not. So obviously, the field of last chance invitational is slightly smaller, and they are in fact already in Worlds.
Yeah, we should also talk about top 4 watch. So Gallop, of course, losing in the finals, just needs another top 4 to qualify for Worlds. The 2 other semifinalists were Ip Longno and Petey, who also just need one more top 4 in order to qualify for Worlds. There were no double top 4 qualifiers this time around.
Yeah, they join Cinemod, Colacoma, and Netscape Navigator from last time, who also are hoping to someday get another top 4. Now, interesting enough, Colacoma got a top 32, which must be stinging just a little bit for them, because if they had had a little bit more luck in their game, they would be a top 16 right now and have the clinch for at least the invitational slot.
All right, let's talk about FETL results. This was quite the week for FETL. A lot of really exciting matches and things going down to the wire. So first off, we had TIL, Team Invoke Lethal, against the Misplay Red Rhombuses. This was a 1-0 victory for Team Invoke Lethal, with Phoenix being the only one on either roster making it to day 2. The Snowfort and Team Ringstar had an exciting game that came down to Mail trying to go all the way, but was unfortunately stopped in the top 16. So the Snowfort falls short to Team Ringstar. The Barbarian Camp versus CSB, another really exciting match that ended up with M. Gallop being the only person still alive for the Barbarian Camp and did manage to gain enough points in order to put the Barbarian Camp on top. This one was pretty crazy because there were 9 players out of the 10 on the active roster that were still live in day 2. So there was a lot to watch here.
And notably, interestingly enough, just to comment here, especially because, I have firsthand experience with what was going on there, is M. Gallop actually took out 3 of these people himself. M. Gallop faced Portich round 1, Batteries round 2, and Keith Pellig in round 3. So lots of team killing happening on both sides of the equation by M. Gallop over there.
Another exciting match. We had Team Misplay Teal Trapezoids taking out Eternal Titans. This one was also a really intense match because it was Watchwolf versus Doc in the top 8, and if Doc won, it would be a victory from Eternal Titans, but Watchwolf ended up winning the entire tournament, so Teal Trapezoids take it down. Team Eternal Journey wins over We Stream Games 1 with Stormguard, If Longno, Alex Firo, and Always Face making day 2, and nobody on We Stream Games 1 making day 2, and Friends of Eternal defeats We Stream Games 2 with day 2 performances by Tempest Dragon King, Baljan, and Mevers, and nobody on We Streams Games 2 making day 2. So, congratulations to all the winners. It was a really exciting tournament with lots of players making deep runs, and that determining the results of the Team League games.
It's really cool because of all the players on the teams that were actively on the active rosters, or what you want to call it, 30 of them made day 2. And I know and I assume that, a good many people on teams that aren't active. I know that both of our sort of inactive members on the Barbarian Camp and the Snow Fort made day 2 with GT and Black Ice, respectively. So, teams have strong consistent performances and, make the Team League very exciting. And if you're not part of the Discord, come be a part of Discord for next week, because it's always fun to sort of see what the team looks like and see how the matchups look out, and being, seeing that it was M Gallop versus Portich round 1 in the top 64 was like, oh, M Gallop, you have this really important matchup because we only have 4 players in the top 64. And if you lose this to Portich, we could easily lose the Team League match. So, you have extra pressure on you, Gallop. And that was kind of a fun to experience.
The pairings for the next Open are as follows, and this is going to be interesting because this is Draft Open, so this is going to be quite a bit different. I imagine there are going to be a lot of roster shakeups between now and then, and perhaps a lot of draft specialists being added to rosters because, I don't think people have used teams that much for limited play. It's mostly for deck construction and testing. All right, so our 2-0 match is going to be the Barbarian Camp and Team Ringstar, both at 2-0. We have Team Invoke Lethal, who is also 2-0, but playing against the Snow Fort, which is 1-1. We have the Teal Trapezoids and the Red Rhombuses facing off against each other. A little team kill action there. Both of those teams are 1-1. We have CSB against Friends of Eternal. Both those teams are 1-1 as well. We have Team Eternal Journey, who's also 1-1 against the O2 Eternal Titans. And we have We Stream Games 1 versus We Stream Games 2. Both of those teams are 0-2. So looking forward to how drafting is going to change things because, it's I think there are a lot of really interesting things about the Draft Open when it comes to like fantasy and Team League and just, preparation for a recurring limited tournament. But this is one of them. How is the Team League going to shape up?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I like the Team League. I like the next dimension adds to Eternal, and I'm super excited to see how. I'm excited for the Draft Open, and I'm also excited to see how the Draft Open impacts the Team League.
All right, let's talk about the deck lists in the top 64 of the tournament. So our metagame breakdown, courtesy of Telemokos, is that out of the top 64 decks, we had 11 Menace discard decks, or Menace Cruel decks, whatever you want to call them, 11 4 or 5 faction sling decks, 7 mono fire, 6 overloader combo, 6 soldiers, 6 mandrakes, 4 tesseract combo decks, and 13 other. And worth noting that of these decks, the top 8 ended up being 3 Menace Cruel decks, 1 Huru Soldiers, 1 Tradition Aggro, 1 Tesseract, 1 Overloader, and 1 Corendon Control. So a lot of these archetypes that were represented heavily in the top 64 just totally did not make the top 8. And I think the biggest glaring omission is Rainbow Sling, or 4 or 5 faction Sling, which did not get past the round of 32.
Yeah, and the other big story, aside from Rainbow Sling, not going super deep into it, is what some of us are calling the clone deck, which is that there was this super conglomerate of ET and CSB, and they all brought the same 80 cards, every last one of them, and they put 9 of their members into the top 64, including all members of Team CSB, and that was sort of in a field that was this diverse, when the field was exceptionally diverse, and even within archetypes, there was like all these 6 overloader combos, none of them I think are 80 cards the same. They have their significant differences. Some were playing overloader market, some were playing overloader main deck. These 6 mandrakes, 4 of them were Knowledge Drakes, that is to say, Time Primal Shadow, and 2 of them were Xenon Drakes. These 6 soldiers, 3 were Haru soldiers, 3 were Tradition soldiers. The Menace Tesseract is the least diverse in some respects, where 3 of us were all based off a list of Tempest Dragon Kings. That is to say that I adapted Tempest Dragon Kings and made what I thought were significant, but ultimately, somewhat relatively minor improvements. And then George A brought their own version of the deck. Unfortunately, I faced them round 1, which made me sad to have to either lose or win, and thankfully ended up winning versus, a fellow Tesseract player. But yeah, so in a field this diverse, the fact that there was the same deck that kind of came in and, just put up a showing of force, just like came in and stomped around and was like, wow, they brought the same deck and it performed really well.
Just a note, I do think that Watchwolf worked with Kolokoma and other members of the Misplay for the Overloader deck. So I think they all played the same exact list. But yeah, it was a very diverse field, especially if you take a look at the different builds that people were using. And I mean, just a lot of people doing slightly different things. And I think that just has to do with the fact that decks were still being tuned into the last few minutes, and they didn't solidify to have like all the same numbers for a certain strategy. But I guess also part of it is that it was very clear that some cards were just way better than everything else, and maybe it didn't matter too much like what the supporting cast were,
Cough,
because
cough, Crafty Occultist, cough, cough.
yeah, Crafty Occultist and Grenahan, we don't have data on the number of copies of those two
Yeah, we do.
cards, but oh,
There were 139 Grenahens and 124 Crafty Occultists, and notably, there were 150 Felon Paintings, which means some of you out there were playing Felon Painting without playing Grenahan. I don't know who you were, but I'm coming for you. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, those two cards are just way better than most of the cards in Expedition. And I mean, Dovid was really powerful, but like it just didn't have this fits into everything, and the powerful cards are in these factions that Grenahan and Cole Occultist did.
Not only was that the case, but so sort of the trio of the week, in my opinion, in some ways, was Display of Menace, Crafty Occultist, and Grenahan. Stick all those in a deck, and you're sort of cooking with gas at that point. And maybe you can take out the display part of it. Some people did, but like the thing is, Dovid is just one card. Where Crafty Occultist and Grenahan, well, that's 2 cards, and having 2 busted cards is better than 1 busted card, or so I've been told. And notably that they don't really have as much of a downside as Dovid. Now Dovid's downside is not the most relevant, but the 2 ones do come back to bite you sometimes, right? And the downside for Grenahan is it's a 1/3 lifesteal, which, while not necessarily what you want to be doing, is reasonable against the mono fire stuff, reasonable against the mandrakes, reasonable against other aggressive strategies. So it's not like it's the worst thing ever. And of course, Crafty's downside is that it doesn't have any. I love Crafty.
Yeah, I think the downside for Grenahan is that it only draws a card like 80% of the time and not a full 100%.
Well, 90% of the right deck, but still. 10% of the time. That's the thing. When you're playing Grenahan, you have to be okay, and you have to be willing to not be tilted. You have to be, constantly aware that this could happen and to not tilt from it, because even if you're playing the best case scenario, you're still going to whiff 10% of the time. And that's just how the card works.
Yeah. Something worth mentioning is that a mono fire deck kind of got some real legs in the last week of the tournament when they released a promo a few days before the tournament. This is Bellax Ravenous one. Well, I don't know. I forget it's a title.
Bellax, Consumer of Formats.
Bellax the Ravenous. I was close. So this was a part of the deck that I ultimately played, but this was a promo released on like Monday. So you had to play on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in order to get the 4 copies for the tournament. It is an 8/8 with summon sacrifice units with total attack of 8 or more, played alongside Grand Suppressor, which stops summon effects, notably stopping Grenahan and Crafty Occultist. So that was the deck that I was playing, and it performed really well in testing, but I think my testing, like, it just overperformed because other people didn't really like the deck, and then I didn't do well in the tournament. So I think my testing was just not the most useful one way or another.
So notably, what the Bellax really added to Mono Fire is that it added an extra dimension of big, powerful things to do, right? Mono Fire, before Bellax, had one big, powerful thing, and that was Might Weaver plus 5 damage plus Overwhelm. Basically, Might Weaver plus like a Prism Gold, and then a Side Slash on it does a lot of damage. But the thing is, that's not necessarily the most consistent, right? It's still a game without Might Weaver, for sure, but like without Might Weaver in the format, I don't think Modifier would have been a thing at all, even without Bellax. But once Bellax was released, suddenly you had an extra dimension to attack on, and that was, you got to play Grand Suppressor, which, as Sunny sort of alluded to, it shuts off Grenahan and Crafty, right? That's a big deal. If everyone's playing Grenahan and Crafty, you just play a turn 2 Grand Suppressor, and suddenly your opponent's cards are significantly less powerful than yours, and you just play your 5/5, give it, your Overwhelm, and you can get past their defenses really easily when they can't, draw into the cards they need to help them kill your big thing. So, that was a pretty important, impactful thing. Notably, this is very different than Mono Fire, but we saw a really cool deck in the top 8, and this was Tyler's deck, who I mentioned at the top of the cast. Tyler was playing a Grand Suppressor, Grenahan, Crafty Occultix, Balak, Sling of the Chi deck. You heard that right. Grand Suppressor and Crafty and Grenahan in the same deck. What a boss right there.
If you want to describe it that way, I mean, Grand Suppressor was very clearly very strong in this format, right? I think that's something that we can say because it shut off like a lot of the most powerful cards. But that being said, if you were playing Grand Suppressor, unless you're an absolute madman, you were not playing those powerful cards, right? Because you would shut off your own summon abilities. So Grand Suppressor is definitely an interesting angle, and the Belax and Might Weaver angle was interesting, although maybe it fell a bit short. But like Belax has only been around for, less than a week at this point, and it wouldn't be too surprising to me to see like a Sling deck, for example, possibly being able to use Bellax and Grand Suppressor and not care that you're shutting off a whole ton of summon effects because your deck's built to deal with it.
I mean, as I said, we saw that. We saw that in the top 8. The person they brought Grand Suppressor, Balax, and Sling. They didn't bring Thunderous news, though, which disappointed some of my team members. It turns out that, you can just choose when to play your cards. So, like, you can not play Crafty if you have Grand Suppressor in play, and that shutting off your opponent's stuff might just be better than playing your stuff if you're also, doing things with like Whispering Winds and Sling of the Chi, right? Just giving yourself time to draw your Balax or play your Sling of the Chi. So I don't hate this combination. It sounds really crazy, but I guess I've also played Grand Suppressor with summons of my own, right? But one of the reasons that summons are so good right now is that No One to Hold Them for Krull is so good. And No One to Hold Them for Krull is so good because that allows you to get things back into play for cheap. And things you want to get back into play for cheap, oftentimes will have a summon effect. That allows you to take advantage of that effect the best.
Yeah, Krull for Crafty Occultist is just ridiculous. It's absurd. All right, let's talk about what we would do going forward. There are a couple of Expedition Tuesday Night Eternals coming up. We have one on Friday the 23rd and Tuesday the 27th. So let's talk about what might be good angles to attack these with. What do you think, Stormblessed?
So really there's sort of 5 choices for decks in some ways, right? You sort of have the 4 or 5 faction, maybe you're going 3 faction Tyler Sling deck, which I think is a cool deck. Even Sunny might disagree. So you have the Sling angle, you have the FPS Scream angle, which you have sort of the ETCSB super conglomerate version with playing Syl of the 5/1. Or you kind of have the TBC sort of variant of, there's a couple of changes between the two of them, but Batteries and Black Ice also brought an interesting version of FPS Scream that I'd recommend looking into if you were curious. They compose basically all of the FPS Scream decks. And then you also have Tessa, which I think is a very real deck, even though it only saw 4 copies in this open. It had a top 64, it had to, unfortunately, because of the mirror. Top 32 finish, top 16 finish, and got second place, so it kind of proved that it could hold its own in a field like this. It has a 0% matchup versus TJS, though, so if you expect tons of TJS control, you're going to be blown away entirely, like paper bag. Besides that, you also have Mock Combo, which we didn't really talk about that much, but it proved that it's still a force to be reckoned with. It got first place and put up results scattered throughout the top 64 entirely, so still a great deck, just kind of a... you gotta predict the meta really well, because if there's a ton of aggro, combo's not going to be quite as good as it would be if there wasn't a bunch of aggro. And then finally, of course, you have the aggro decks in sort of the soldiers, the mono fire, and maybe there's some other aggro decks in the future variant. So these are sort of the 5 archetypes, I guess. I don't know. These aren't really pillars anymore. These are sort of 5 of the decks that exist. You also have other decks that are great, like Mandrakes, I think is still a fine deck. Basically, it feels like there's not really a level 1 deck in Expedition so much as like a ton of level 1 decks.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I noticed leading up to the tournament, is that there just seem to be a lot of decks that seem to be pretty reasonably positioned to do well, although like they'll have some good matchups, they'll have some bad matchups, and it's really has a lot to do with what you face up against. But I mean, I think based on today's results, I think that Mandrakes and Monofire are not really going to be big players in the metagame. Like, Monofire was popular because it was doing really well against the Overloader decks that were popular a week ago. Overloader was all over the place, like when we recorded our last cast, if I recall correctly. And Monofire is good against that, like really good against that. Probably has one of the best matchups against it. And I guess Mandrakes is like really good against Monofire. But in any case, these did not seem like they held up to the tournament standards, the rigors of the tournament, if you will.
The interesting thing is that I know that there were a couple of people that audibled to combo after some of their teammates noticed a distinct lack of aggro in the format. So I kind of think what happened is that Mach combo was on the rise, which made Monofire go on the rise. Monofire was on the rise, Mach combo kind of died out, which meant Monofire kind of died out, which meant that Mach combo was suddenly well positioned in the tournament somehow.
Yeah, it's a carefully balanced ecosystem where none of these decks are necessarily way better than the other ones.
No.
We should actually talk about this combo deck that won the tournament. It has both of our fingerprints all over it.
Yes.
So this is playing for Overloader main. It's playing for Hardiness main, which is something that when we were working on the Overloader combo deck, we put the Hardiness in the market, but it makes a lot of sense to put Hardiness in the main deck if Monofire is more of a presence. And I mean, this is like 6 cards off of a build that we were playing with sometime in the last week, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's got a variety of differences, right? The main thing is that it's basically playing still the full set of Hardiness and Realign the Stars, which meant that, and one extra Pyrotech. But like me and Sunny, if for those who don't know, we're on Discord a bunch in the FE server, and we're just kind of jamming and tuning the combo deck a bunch. Like, Sunny made some variants of it, like with Saber of the Meek and stuff. And then my big addition is that I said, let's put in Dark Wisp and Devour just to have more cycling through the deck and reducing down the number of Pyrotechs and Arsons, not having them be maxed out or anything like that. And this deck, sort of looks a lot like that. Or maybe it was inspired by the Direwolf version on the website. You don't
know. Yeah, I guess we should talk about that too in a bit. But yeah, Down Dark Scavenger is like something I think that was my idea, and your idea was Devour, like just having Devour and Dark Wisp. Hardiness in the market is I guess they didn't go with that, but like Overloader main, this just looks like a lot. Well, congratulations to us, we have a lot of influence on other people's decks, but more congratulations to Kolakoma and the Watchwolf and the members of the Misplay who actually built the tournament winning deck.
What's funny to me, just on just a single card basis, is Down Dark Scrounger was a card that I was like, I don't even. So Sunny went up to 3 copies, and I was considering going down to 1 copy from two copies to start with. And I was like, I don't know how much I like this card. This card seems pretty like awkward and like not really good in like your opening hand. Like, how good can this card really be? And then of course I play a deck at the Open that has 4 main deck Scroungers, and it was just like the best card in my deck a lot of the time. So not really. The best card in my deck was Crafty every time, but still.
It's basically reread. It's a reread that is a split card with a 2/2.
Yeah, it's really good. So just a quick story is that I won a game because I attacked with a Down Dark Scrounger and with a bunch of other things, and then my opponent ended up being at 7, and I went condemn Vara's Favor, condemn Char for lethal.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's sort of a rundown of these decks. Honestly, I think any one of them, including Mandrakes or even Monofire, are good. And so the thing is, there's sort of 2 metas, right? There's sort of the Expedition TNE meta that you might expect to find, and the ladder meta you might expect to find. And on ladder, I think you're still going to find a bunch of Mandrakes and a bunch of Monofire because people like that sort of deck, and they're simpler to play. They're not as taxing as Tessa, and Tessa's a really taxing deck to play. I was exhausted after I finished my run yesterday, or 2 days ago rather. Those decks are less taxing on the mind to play in many respects, and they are still solid. I don't think they're that bad of decks. So I think you'll still see them on ladder now. In the TNEs, you might expect to see less of them. Maybe you have some more combo. I don't know, but yeah, it's still a wide open format. Although it's nice that there's some amount of structure now, in a sense, right? Where while it's wide open, while there's a ton of decks, we kind of have an idea about that there's like 7 big archetypes that exist.
Yeah, I guess so. So something I was going to say is that if you are playing something like Sling or Scream, I think you need to be a little more disruptive for a deck that like Overloader or Tesseract, because those 2 decks made it to the finals. And I think it's largely because a lot of these decks were focusing on their game plan and not worrying too much about disruption. And I mean, if you don't play Disruption against a combo deck, they're just going to do their thing, and it's more powerful than what you're doing.
I had multiple games where I was hand attacked 3 times and still won in the Swiss rounds because, one, the Tesseract's not really that much of a combo deck in some respects. It's just sort of a control value Grenadin's deck that has a Tesseract on top of it. But also, the key about the hand attack is you need to also apply pressure, right? If you take out their hand, you also need to somehow pressure the board or some other way to finish the game, right? If you're gonna spend 3 turns hand attacking and then after that play a speaking circle and try to threaten that way, that's one thing. But if you just hand attack 3 turns in a row and then play a whispering wind or then play a crafty, that's not putting as much pressure on as you might want. So there's a balance to be had there.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, my point is with the Tesseract deck, there is a turn where you're going to have to stick your neck out there, right?
Yes.
And that's if they do something about that turn, you could be in some trouble. Anyway, let's talk about something you touched on briefly, which is the key cards and strategies article that Direwolf released in the middle of the week. So I thought this was pretty interesting. Leading up to the tournament, they had a bunch of sample deck lists, and most of these aren't very good, but they're just I don't know if these are pulled from Warcry. I don't know where they got these deck lists. Maybe they just made something that seems reasonably okay. But the weird thing about it, and this is great, by the way. I'm all for them previewing the strategies and or cards you might see before a tournament. I think that's great. But the weird thing is that they included a deck list of mine that I posted 12 hours earlier in Discord only. I don't think I put it on Eternal Warcry even, but it was just an experimental version of the deck. And they didn't ask me, which I'm not if they asked me, I definitely would have said yes. I'd be like, yeah, that's awesome. But it was just kind of weird seeing, posting this list in the Discord late at night, and then the next day in the morning seeing that it was on the Direwolf front page.
Yeah, there's also some speculation that they have a deck called the Speaking Circle Menace deck, which is funny that they are key card 3, the Speaking Circle, when there was which I didn't think was a key card because I thought specifically Matt Combo pushed it out of the format a little bit. And it didn't show up on the top 25 cards or anything like that. But what's funny is that, one, I thought if you're going to make a Speaking Circle deck and you're going to show off that, it would probably be a TJS list that, that PD brought to a top 4 finish. But instead, what it looks like they did, we have no confirmation, it looks like they took Cassandra's Menace control deck from Warcry and then stuck in 4 Speaking Circles.
Yeah, this was weird. I like that they did this, but we don't know, they didn't say where they got the decks from. Did the devs build the decks from scratch without any reference? Did they take decks from Warcry and modify them? Did they just take decks from various Discords? Because I mean, that's plausible at this point too. I mean, I would like to see them just link a few lists from TNE or just from Eternal Warcry or something like that, but I guess there's no official affiliation between Eternal Warcry and Direwolf, although I mean they've built they being the folks at Eternal Warcry, they've built the best resource there is for Eternal.
The thing is that you say that there's no affiliation, and there's obviously no affiliation, but at the end of the article they say, for more inspiration, check out our friends at Eternal Warcry who have a large repository of expedition deck lists, or join the community on Discord. So they literally link to Eternal Warcry at the end of the article. So they could have easily said we grabbed some lists from Eternal Warcry, we grabbed some lists from the community. I mean, I would have rather seen maybe we grabbed a couple lists from Eternal Warcry and a couple lists from the last Tuesday Night Eternal, the community tournament, because that would also be one plugging Eternal Warcry more, which I think is a great resource that more people should know about, and also plug TNE a little bit more, right? Maybe Dallas doesn't want to plug TNE because they're afraid of overloading. Get it? It's a pun. TNE's capacity for play. If there's 200 people that played it at a TNE, that'd be a struggle, I think, for a number of reasons. But I think it's an interesting idea. I'm curious to see if Direwolf goes forward with this for future constructed tournaments, or maybe they do a draft article where they're here's the draft archetypes. So I'm curious to see if Direwolf will continue. If they do, how will they perhaps adjust for the future?
Yeah, and one more thing about just linking to Warcry or TNE results is that it highlights individual members of the community, and it was definitely cool to be highlighted, if a bit weird.
They misspelled your name and they misspelled Lights Out Ace's name in there. They've had 2 names in the article and they misspelled both of them.
I think they had 3 names and they misspelled 2 of them.
Oh yeah, they had Boxer as well. You're right. Yes. No, the misspelled Boxer because they didn't call him Boxer, and that's his real name.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all we got for you today. Thank you to our patrons, Odzos, Prewibin, Cotillion, Alcide Bava, Work Done Son, Chamomile, Chrissier, D-Dub, and Yeast Out for continuing to support us day in and day out. Thank you to our editor, SRFS, for putting in a ton of work behind the scenes.
And tune in next time for the next couple of casts for some draft advice as we move into the draft open portion of the season.
Yeah, we generally don't talk about draft a ton, but we will be getting you prepared for the open because, I mean, that's what we do. That's what we do here on FECast. All right, and finally, thank you for listening and liking our posts and giving us fake internet points and whatnot. Until next time, we will see you in the friend zone. Have a good one. The Friends of Eternal Discord is the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. We have players of all skill and experience levels all happy to help each other out on basically any aspect of their Eternal gameplay. And making all this possible is our generous patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support FECast or Friends of Eternal, consider donating at patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we'll see you in the Friend Zone.